Welcome to episode number 2 of the GeoScholar podcast. This is the GeoScholar. August 11th, 1999, a tornado hit the city of Salt Lake City, Utah. And one thing that made this tornado very unusual is that it occurred in Utah. When many people think of tornadoes, Utah is often one of the last places a lot of people think about. While tornadoes have occurred in Utah, they are very rare. Many people would think of places such as Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, places that are in Tornado Alley, and for good reason. A lot of tornadoes occur there. Tornadoes are much rarer in Utah. But August 11th, 1999, 20 years ago, that is exactly what happened in the city of Salt Lake City, Utah. And this is how it started. It started out, you had a cloudy day. It was a cloudy but calm day, cloudy, calm summer day. And there was a microburst that occurred, but nothing out of the ordinary. And then there was hail, there was severe weather that was taking place. And then as storms were moving through, what happened was that there was a lot of rotation that started occurring. And as that rotation occurred, approaching the city of Salt Lake City, a funnel cloud had developed. And with that funnel cloud, it started to travel west, and that funnel cloud eventually became a tornado. And one thing about this particular tornado, it is Utah's most destructive tornado. $170 million worth of damage. And what made this tornado so particularly destructive is that it hit downtown Salt Lake City. It hit the city. And whenever you have a natural disaster hitting an urban area like that, you're going to have a lot of damage. There was also a death from this tornado, and it was the second tornado in Utah's history in which a fatality took place. Over 80 people were injured from this tornado. Now, given Utah's geographic location, you have a location where you're situated in the inner mountain west. You're bordering the states of Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, not Montana, but I'll start over. Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Nevada. You're bordering Arizona and New Mexico in the little Four Corners region. And the thing about this region, this is considered a region where tornadoes are a rarity because geography is a big factor in why you have tornadoes occur in certain places and not so much in others. For instance, when you look at Tornado Alley, you look at the Great Plains region, you look at states like Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas. You look at these areas that get a fair amount of tornadoes or a large amount of tornadoes, you have to think about some of the factors that make these regions quite ripe for tornado activity. You have to think about this. You have a region that is flat, well, not uniformly flat, but you have a region in which you don't really have large mountain ranges in between those areas. You have that warm, moist Gulf air coming up from the south, and then you have all that cold air coming in from Canada. And that right there and create a recipe for severe weather. And this is where tornadoes often occur. They occur during thunderstorms, and this is what happened in Utah, Salt Lake City. This is what happened. It happened during severe weather. It happened because at the time there was hail and there were storms coming through. And as meteorologists at the time, retired meteorologist Mark Eubank described, these were the conditions that he described. He said that there were storms that were coming through the Salt Lake City area. They collided. And with the collision of those storms, it created the updraft movement that's needed to form the tornadoes. And that's one of the most important things in tornado formation is the updraft, because you're having that updraft of air taking place, and then you start to have winds coming out of different directions, and this is how you get the spin of that tornado. And that's that is how Mark Eubank described the tornado occurring. He described it as, the way he looked at it, there are a collision of storms, and then you had that updraft that, it created the right conditions for a tornado in Utah. And you also have to think about how a tornado forms. You have that, you have the air towards the surface, which is quite unstable. You have that warm, moist air, and it's not stable. And then that warm, moist air rises it rises, and then as you have the condensity, when you have the condensation, when you go further up, that heat is released. And then as it goes up, you have sort of the formation of thunder clouds, and that instability is what creates a lot of the thunderstorms. And then when you have that severe weather, you have the combination of the updrafts and you have the wind coming out of different directions. And then that causes rotation of the clouds. And then you start to have the formation of a funnel cloud and then a tornado. The point of the updraft is to concentrate that spinning rotation into a spinning column of air. And that is a big part of what makes the tornado what it is. You have that updraft and it concentrates that spin. And as meteorologist Mark Eubanks described it, you had the situation where you had storms colliding and you had that updraft, you have that upward movement that was able to, concentrate that spin. You had all the conditions that were necessary to create that tornado. And it really caught a lot of people off guard because a lot of people might think, well, this is Utah. We don't get destructive tornadoes like this. And it was an F2 tornado on the Fujita scale. F2 having winds of 113 to 157 miles per hour. And it was a very destructive tornado for Utah. Many people would think, well, we don't get tornadoes here. Some people were thinking that. And it caught a lot of people off guard. And so for that reason, it really, for many people, it sent a message of, a tornado can occur anywhere. Tornadoes are a lot rarer in many places than other places. In places like the Great Plains, tornadoes are commonplace. They are commonplace in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. They're commonplace there. That region is called Tornado Alley for a reason. It's very commonplace there to have tornadoes. You have all the conditions. You have many days where the air will be warm, humid, and unstable. And then you have further up, you have the troposphere where you have the cooler, drier air. And then you have the conditions where you're going to have heat rising, you're going to have the instability, you're going to have the formation of storm clouds and the thunder clouds forming. You're going to have that situation where severe weather occurs. You have the situations where you have winds coming in two different directions. You have the updraft coming in. You have the Great Plains, and the geography is absolutely optimal for that. You have a region where you have large amounts of relatively flat areas. You have rolling hills, obviously, in many places, but you have an area where there's not much between the Gulf air coming up, the heat coming up from the Gulf, and then you have the colder air coming in from Canada. You have those conditions that will you have the conditions needed to create tornadoes, the conditions for severe weather. This is why you can find many storm chasers in Oklahoma and Kansas. But one lesson to take away about the Salt Lake City tornado is that it can occur anywhere. If the conditions are right for it, it can occur anywhere. If you have the right conditions. And another thing, tornadoes can and do occur very close to cities or in cities. It has happened before. And this is one thing that caught people off guard. It occurred in downtown Salt Lake City. This scared a lot of people because when you think about where tornadoes occur, you don't think of them occurring in cities. You think about those areas out on the plains. You think about, you know, the Wizard of Oz. You think about Kansas. You think about that farm out in the middle of nowhere, and you're able to see some tornado off in the distance somewhere. You don't really think about the fact that tornadoes have occurred inside of a major city before. It has happened, not as often as you think, but it happens. It happens more than many people think about. We think about tornadoes occurring, out in the middle of nowhere. But in theory, they can happen almost anywhere if the conditions are right for it. You don't have to be out in the middle of nowhere to see a tornado. You can be in the suburbs, you can be in the city. It can be anywhere. And that's a good lesson to take from it. It may be very rare where you live. It doesn't mean it can't happen or won't happen. It's just basically saying keep your eyes peeled. Learn as much as you can about the geography of your area. Learn as much as you can about the geography of places all over the world. Learn about weather. Learn about, what shapes a climate in a certain place. Learn about the lay of the land because anything can happen. We live in a dynamic world. And this is the end of the GeoScholar podcast, episode 2. Be sure to check out my channel, The GeoScholar, and be sure to subscribe to it. Follow me on Twitter. And until next time, this is The GeoScholar.